herzlich willkommen zum Bookfest Digital, der Special Edition im Rahmen der Frankfurter Buchmesse 2020. Die kommende Stunde, die steht ganz im Zeichen der internationalen Literatur. Lassen Sie sich also mitnehmen auf eine Reise und das einmal rund um die Welt. Los geht es in Nordamerika, dann geht es weiter nach Schottland, von dort nach Kenia und dann nach Australien und dann wieder zurück nach Lateinamerika. Die Autorin und die Autoren, die wir in dieser Stunde zu Gast haben, die könnten eigentlich nicht unterschiedlicher sein. Sie haben aber eins alle gemeinsam. Sie sind den aktuellen Debatten auf der Spur in einer Welt, die in Aufruhr ist und das nicht nur aufgrund von Corona. Und alle diese Autoren und Autorinnen, die zeigen, dass gute Bücher immer noch eminent wichtig sind, unerlässlich und auch so etwas wie kulturelle Barometer. Das sicher virulenteste Thema, das derzeit viele Menschen, vor allen Dingen in der westlichen Welt, umtreibt, das ist der grassierende Rassismus. Spätestens seit dem schrecklichen Tod des US-Amerikaners George Floyd spricht man wieder darüber. Lauter und heftiger denn je. Eines der wichtigsten, aber auch umstrittensten Bücher zum Thema Rassismus hat nun Ibram X. Kendi vorgelegt. Kendi, 1982 in New York geboren, lehrt an der Universität von Boston, als jüngster Professor übrigens ever. Und er ist einer der renommiertesten Rassismusforscher in den USA. 2019 veröffentlichte er sein Buch How to be an Anti-Racist. Das Buch liegt nun auch in deutscher Übersetzung vor, übrigens unter dem Originaltitel. Und es ist eine Art Anleitung. Eine Anleitung, wie gelebter, und das heißt ein expliziter Antirassismus aussehen könnte.
Yeah, I'm immensely happy that I get to interview Dr. Ibram X. Kendi today. He is a New York bestselling author. He is the founder of the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center at the American University and the youngest ever recipient of the National Book Award. Also, the author of the book we want to talk about, How to be an Anti-Racist. Welcome to this talk.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking your time. Yeah, it's such a pleasure. And some of our viewers today might not be familiar with the term anti-racist or the concept of being anti-racist at all. Could you just tap into what defines an anti-racist? Yeah.
So an anti-racist is someone who is expressing and believes that the racial groups are equals. It's someone who thereby sees the cause of racial inequities in our societies as not something being wrong with a particular racial group, but something being wrong with that nation's policies. And that an anti-racist is someone who is literally challenging those racist policies, that systemic racism within their sort of community. And it's by contrast to someone who is being racist is someone who believes that certain racial groups are superior or inferior, or that there's something wrong with darker groups of color, or someone who is doing nothing in the face of racial inequality and injustice, or someone who, no matter what they say, no matter what they do, no matter how they demean, no matter how they exclude, they consider themselves to be perfectly not racist.
Yeah, I mean, like, given that, like, your book just got published in Germany, and given the history, the racist history that Germany has, given the Holocaust, given the widely still unknown genocide to the Herero and Nama in today's Namibia, one would assume that people are inherently anti-racist in Germany, yet we have more racist people in politics or in the parliament. We have had several right-wing terrorist attacks against BPOC in Germany. Nonetheless, we're having this discussion of racism even existing in Germany at the moment, ongoing. It's like, where lies the root of racism if these events do not work to make people anti-racist by default?
Well, really the roots of racism is self-interest. For instance, when you have a politician who believes the way in which he can convince, let's say, white people from Germany to the United States, that the way he gets them to support policies that are going to hurt them is by convincing them that he is trying to help them. And the way he convinces he's trying to help those white people is by saying that the true source of their problems and their harm are not the policies he's trying to institute, but those immigrants, those migrants, those darker people, those people of color. They are the people you should fear. Those are the people who are your enemies, not people like me who are actually instituting policies that benefit the super wealthy as opposed to everyday people. And so that's how they're able to mass manipulate people to, let's say, vote for them. Or, obviously it was in the self-interest of slave traders, of colonizers, of slaveholders, to imagine or project this, to institute racist policies and claim that they were civilizing the natives when they were exploiting them. So, I mean, I think it really sits in self-interest, and that self-interest still exists, in groups and individuals today.
Coming from a migrant family myself, I was raised in this misconception, what I understand as a misconception by my parents, that if I go and not be criminal, or if I work very hard, or if I get the right education, I can free myself of the concept of race and become someone that is considered a full member or a worthy member of society. Yet I'm 30 years old today, and I'm still facing racism on an everyday level, which is kind of hard at times. And I just get complimented for my German, for example, or how eloquently I can speak, etc. It's why is this concept maybe still so deep rooted also in us as Black people, that we can free ourselves of racist ideas and concepts?
Well, because Black people too are taught this idea that the roots of racism is ignorance and hate. And we're taught too that the reason why, let's say, white people believe Black people are inferior is because they just don't know Black people. Or indeed that there are certain Black people who are acting in a negative, lazy, violent, criminal manner. And so if they would only act better, then white people would think better about them. I don't think, so Black people too have not really been made aware that what's actually happening is that you have these people who are mass producing racist ideas for the consumption of other white people, and those white people are believing them. And so it's not as if the source of the racist ideas is their own ignorance. The source is literally, the clouds of rain that are raining on their head, and you acting in an upstanding manner is not going to stop those clouds when it's in other people's self-interest. And actually, what's fascinating is, as Black people have seen over the ages, when somehow Black people are able to act in an upstanding manner and speak, quote, good English or good German, you have many white people who you know what, you're exceptional. You're an exception to the rule of those other people that speak badly. You're extraordinary. You're not like those ordinary inferior Black people. And so what I've been encouraging Black people to do is just be their imperfect selves, because the source, you are not going to, it is not on Black people to convince or educate white people that we are human. It's on white people to educate themselves.
That should be a given. A lot of conversations we are having right now are just not there yet. It feels like they're not there. Especially if, to just go back to this understanding that there is no racism in Germany, for example. How do Black people or BPOC people or even white people that are getting or living that concept of being anti-racist or acting anti-racist? How do these people get through to people who are firmly in the belief, which are a big part of our society, that they are not racist, or that there is not even racism that we need to discuss? How do you enter a dialogue with these people?
Well, let me just say, in the United States, our president Donald Trump claims not only that he's not racist, but he is the least racist person anywhere in the world. His supporters not only claim that he is not racist, they claim they are not racist. And I emphasize this because I think it's widely known around the world just how racist Donald Trump is. And so if so many Americans who support him could believe that they are not racist and he is not racist, then it really goes to show just how deep the denial is among people who are being racist. And it's not a surprise to me because indeed the heartbeat of racism itself has always been denial. So we shouldn't be surprised when people who are expressing racist ideas are denying those ideas are racist. We shouldn't be surprised when people who are supporting racist policies are denying their policies are racist. That is inherent in racism itself. And so what I've tried to do to get people to reflect on whether in fact they are being racist or their country is being racist is provide definitions. And so when people swear to me they're not racist, then I ask them to define what a racist is. And not just what a racist is to them or for them, but every person who claims they are not racist must know what a racist is. In other words, they must be able to define racist in a way that we can put in a dictionary and apply to all of humankind. If you can't do that in a clear and consistent way, then you can't even assess whether you're racist or anti-racist. But that's what most people don't have definitions. And so I'm really trying to provide people with definitions, at least those open-minded people, and also remove the construct of not racist. So we're either being racist or anti-racist. We either believe ideas of racial hierarchy or ideas of racial equality. Either we're supporting policies that are leading to racial inequity or equity. There's really no in between that. And not racist is indeed the sound of racist denial.
I personally feel like a lot of people have issues with like being that whole person, like being a racist per se or being an anti-racist per se. How does one explain or act like anti-racist? Like, what is this like in between that a lot of people feel comfortable saying, but they don't feel comfortable being like an anti-racist?
Well, I think one thing what I also show in How to Be an Anti-Racist is many people believe racist and not racist to be who they are, to be that's their identity. They believe these to be a fixed category. In other words, I'm not racist. That is who I am, and that's who I'll always be. And I'll show you that because of who I love, who I'm friends with, and so on and so forth. But racist and anti-racist are actually descriptive terms. They describe what a person is being in any given moment. And so if in one moment a person is saying those migrants from Namibia are inferior, in that moment, they're being racist. If in the next moment, they're defending policies, I should say they're supporting policies that are creating equity between migrants from Namibia and native white Germans, then they're being anti-racist. If in the very next moment, they're saying those migrants from Syria are dangerous, in that moment, they're being racist. If in the very next moment, they're saying those migrants, from Iran are actually equals, they're being anti-racist. So I think what happens with people is most people believe in certain ways of racial equality, and other ways they support racial inequity. And so really that's why these are descriptive terms. What are you being in any given moment? That's why I'm urging people to be anti-racist. What is it? What are you saying? What are you doing? Because that describes who, or I should say, what you're being in any given moment.
A lot of times the media displays that it's the poor people who are racist. It's not the elite or the people who have the money. But when we look at studies or people that you claim to be in power or like do the policies and try to uphold, then these are in fact people like Donald Trump. That system is working for them at the moment, right? how does movements like Black Lives Matter, in a way, or the decolonization of the streets movement with the Confederation flag, we have similar movements here, contribute of like maybe starting to shift that power back to the people?
Well, I mean, that should be the key. And so to give an example, in the United States, you had white elites who had made the case that the people who are racist, the white people who are racist, are the so-called white trash. In other words, white poor people. To, again, deflect blame and to deny the way in which they are contributing to racism. And fundamentally, really the seed or the cradle of racism is policy. And so those who have the power to make and shape policies have the ultimate form of power to be able to either support policies that are leading to inequity that are racist or policies that are leading to equity that are anti-racist. And what movements are seeking to do is to compel those people to use their power to create justice and equity for all, or they're driving them from power. And I think that, you know, really, essentially, as I've studied throughout the history of racism, more so than a moral struggle or struggle over ideas, it's been more centrally a power struggle.
So effectively, when we're talking about becoming anti-racist or shifting these power policies, then it is encouraged basically to go vote this year and to put people in place that are going to change the policies, that are going to effectively also change the equity, like bring us to an equity level. When we're thinking about this politics, and that RBG, for example, in the US just died, and we might have, a power shift, another imbalance. How does that discourage people in their fight for equity?
Oh, it does discourage people. I mean, certainly when you're fighting or battling for anything, and you are not successful, or you lose a battle, or one of your teammates sort of go down, it can be discouraging. But in order for us to win, let me say, if we stop fighting, then we're guaranteed to lose. And this society and this nation and this world of white supremacy and racial inequality and justice will be guaranteed forever. And so for me, I can certainly be sad and hurt and upset, when battles are lost and when freedom fighters go down, but ultimately they're going to want us to press forward. And they're going to want us to fight for an anti-racist world. And that's what I'm focused on doing.
Well, thank you so much for this insightful talk. I have this book already. Thank you. Everyone in Germany can buy it now. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Dass Bücher die Welt verändern können, das beweist auch ein Mann namens Sean Bethel. Zu Hause ist er in Wigtown, einem kleinen Küstenort im Südwesten von Schottland. Dort vollbringt Bethel mit seinem Antiquariat The Bookshop ein kleines Wunder, denn er verkauft die Bücher von dort in die ganze Welt. Und die gibt sich zugleich auch bei ihm in Form einer äußerst kuriosen Kundschaft die Klinke in die Hand. Nicht immer nur zu Bethels Vergnügen. Von den Höhen und Tiefen seines Daseins hat er berichtet in seinem Tagebuch eines Buchhändlers. Das wurde ein Bestseller, auch in Deutschland.
My name is Sean Bithell. I'm the owner of the bookshop in Wigtown, which is here. I'm also the author of 3 books: Diary of a Bookseller, Confessions of a Bookseller, and coming out on the 5th of November in the UK, 7 Kinds of People You Find in Bookshops. So it's a great privilege to be asked to do something for Frankfurt Book Fair, and I'm just really sorry it's not happening this year. So hopefully it'll be okay next year. My publisher profile has suggested that I give you a quick tour of the shop to give you an idea of what the books are about, and then talk briefly about the books. So here we go.
There's a story waiting inside, behind the door as it opens wide, and I wandering, hoping to find something as they tell the stories we know and those we don't are waiting to be held and taken home. There's a strange man inside in a shop with books. Who knows what I like in a shop with books. He'll rush with tea to my side in a shop with books, and a stack of books piled high. And if I'm lucky enough, well, there will be lots of stuff that makes me smile inside. In a shop with books, 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 in a shop with books. Shelves stacked high fills my eyes. I can't describe. Who knows what you'll find?
The reason I started writing was because if you work in a bookshop, anybody who's ever worked in a bookshop will tell you that there's just every single day something happens that there's a story. So the first book, Diary of a Bookseller, was really written as a sort of aid memoir because my memory is so terrible. Every single day there's at least one story, whether it's a customer telling you their life story or some sort of unpleasant transaction, whatever. So I started keeping notes, and they ended up as the first book, which is the Diary of a Bookseller, and I've kept the diary going ever since. It just seemed to lend itself naturally to the diary format, so that came out in 2017. The second book is pretty much an extension of the first book. So yeah, it just carries on. It's another year, and I keep the diary going every single day. Every day in the shop, I write about what happens. So it's unfortunately for the reading public, there's plenty more if there's an appetite for it. It's become a labour of love. I started writing it I started writing it in 2014, and it's just become something that it's almost every day. It's like a duty to keep it up to date, but also it's a real privilege. The third book, which my publisher profile asked me to write, is 7 Kinds of People You Find in Bookshops, which is kind of a condensed version of the other 2 books. It's all the customer interactions sort of distilled into a very small and very offensive book. It's a different sort of book. It's not in the diary format, and it's guaranteed to offend almost everybody. So my apologies. So I apologise if you recognise yourself in it, and at the same time, I don't. Tough.
And if I'm lucky enough, well, there will be lots of stuff that makes me smile inside. In a shop with books in, a shop with books in, a shop with books in, in a shop with books in, a shop with books in, a shop with books in.
Gerade erst, nämlich diesen Dienstag, ging es auf einem Podium im Vorfeld der Buchmesse um die Frage, ob es das eigentlich gibt, afrikanische Literaturen. Und wenn ja, was sie ausmacht, nicht zuletzt auch aus innerafrikanischer Sicht. Mit auf dem Podium war die Kenianerin Yvonne Adhiambo Ovuor, eine der produktivsten und profiliertesten Autorinnen des afrikanischen Kontinents. 2014 debütierte sie mit dem Roman Der Ort, an dem die Reise endet. Der lässt anhand einer Familie die Geschichte Kenias Revue passieren, von der Ära des Kolonialismus über die Mau-Mau-Aufstände bis hin dann zu den Unruhen im Anschluss an die Wahlen 2007, 2008. Seitdem ist Yvonne Adhiambo Ovuor auf allen großen Festivals zu Gast. Zuletzt war sie auch Artist in Residence an der Freien Universität in Berlin. Zu Hause aber ist sie noch immer in Nairobi, dort, wo sie 1968 auch zur Welt kam. Und von dort ist sie nun auch zu uns geschaltet. Herzlich willkommen, Yvonne Adhiambo Ovuor. Hello, Yvonne. Oh yeah, I can see you. Hello, that's so lovely to see you again. And every time you're looking different. It's so lovely to be in conversation again. Welcome to Frankfurt Book Fair.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yvonne, The Dragonfly Sea is your second novel. It was released in 2019, and this novel spans several lives and languages, 2 continents, 1 body of water, and crucial topics of the African past and our present as well, in a book of 500 pages. What was the beginning of this journey for the writer Yvonne Adhiambo Ovuor?
The first was a question, what does China's return to Africa actually portend? Not just for the future, but I was mostly interested in kind of the intimate histories. And there were two other issues. One was a passion, a kind of seduction by and a kind of unrequited love for the ocean, for the Swahili Seas or the Indian Ocean, which started when I was so old. And I think the third one is simply from experience when running the Zanzibar Film Festival, running into a 4th generation Zanzibari of Chinese descent and understanding that there were stories there that remained untold.
Yeah, we will return to that later. The novel takes place on an island. It's called Pate. It's an island off the coast of Kenya. What kind of place is this island, and why is it so important for the novel or for you as a writer? You go to Pate is one of those places that's kind of stepped a little bit out of time, and you find that the history of the world as you think about it is it happens differently there and seems to have happened. It's a sense of continuity of something that perhaps hasn't got a language yet. It's colorful, magical, and its relationship with the ocean is very, very palpable right there. Yet in a country, this little place that sometimes is invisible was very central for the big contemporary issues, the war on terror, and also in a way the return of China. In the novel, it's home to Ayana, the female protagonist. In the beginning of the novel, Ayana is a young girl, and later she will undertake a journey as a young woman, a journey to China, because once her ancestors came from China to Pate and settled there. Having in mind the actual relation between Africa and China, which is quite a difficult one, I would say, this turn might come along as a surprise to many readers. So why did you decide to bring into this relation between China and Africa?
Because it's a current theme and I was mostly concerned with the African perspective. I was curious that the African imagination for what this really means had been absent, and a lot of the rhetoric and the narrative was being framed in mostly the West, and was, I think, and in the framing, the historical connections had been completely either ignored or completely amputated. I think it was just important as an African, as a Kenyan, as an African, to understand for ourselves, using stories of the time, the place, what might this return actually mean? And maybe to emphasize that an old connection. This is an historical connection.
Yeah, you mentioned already the word history. And I think history and rewriting history is quite crucial to you as a writer in general, but also to this novel. And I'm coming to that point because you also highlight former links between East Africa and Islam, so that we also get an idea of the vast and the richness of the former culture of East Africa. Is that?
Hello?
Yes. Could you
Okay.
hear me? History. Could you hear me? My question.
The last line.
I said that history and history rewriting is quite crucial to you as a writer. Is that right?
Well, history, not rewriting as much as reclaiming and reactivating. A lot of the historical texts, for whatever reason, deliberately left out what was apparent and what was very much in evidence. And as part of the re-inhabitation of our own memories, globalized Africans, history provides insight for us. So I think that as I very much as a palette, as a source of inspiration. And I think your second question was about East Africa. You cannot imagine an East Africa without the influences and both the cultural as well as the influences of Islam, and it's an older, complex, intricate, ecumenical version that gets lost in the retelling again, in the kind of retelling of what Islam actually portends.
In the TED lecture you gave already in 2010, you speak about memory as a periscope into the future. Is that in connection with the fact that the novel highlights as a subplot the war on terror you mentioned already? So what does it mean, memory as a periscope into the future, in terms of this novel?
Actually, less on the war on terror, more about the readmission, reconnection in kind of both intellectual but also imaginative way of the relationship, the evolving relationship with China, with the Middle Kingdom. I know China did that in order to understand who they were in the world. It's no secret that part of the complaint on the African continent is our preoccupation with a very recent history and a seeming inability to gaze much deeper. And I think doing that, it becomes a source of strength, of imagination, and a founding for a great future.
The novel is also a novel on what it means to live in a globalized world as someone descending from Africa. And it's a very ambivalent perspective on living in this globalized world. So it's a gift, but also a challenge. Is that right?
As with all gifts, gifts might also come with shadows. But but frankly, it was also a reclamation, the reclamation and the re-narrating of what is called the global monsoon complex. The globalization and cosmopolitanism is not new to East Africa. The version that, of course, operates it presents itself as something original, something new, but cosmopolitanism and globalization through especially the seas, through the Swahili seas or the Indian, what becomes known as the Indian Ocean, and a 1,000-year-old story.
Actually, in that lecture you gave in 2010, you spoke about the importance of regional archetypes for African culture. Was the novel your way to explore these kind of archetypes of Africa?
Absolutely. So it's part of my quest as an artist. So I'm always trying, to reactivate these archetypes for the reader, not just of the continent, but for those who need kinds of archetypes to wake up our own archetypes. Hopefully, something appeared within the story that reflects that.
I think that's the reason why we have these wonderful Swahili proverbs always at the beginning of each chapter. The one of time is over already. Thank you so much for giving us the insights into your novel and for sharing your time with us.
Thank you, Claudia. All the best.
Thank you. Und wir blicken nun nach Australien. 2008 erschien dort ein erstaunliches Buch über das Thema Flucht. Es heißt Ein neues Land, besteht einzig aus Bildern und ist so etwas wie ein Meilenstein der Graphic Novel geworden. Geschrieben und gezeichnet hat es Sean Tan. 1974 kam er selbst als Einwandererkind in Australien zur Welt. Für sein umfangreiches Werk, das Kinder und Erwachsene gleichermaßen begeistert, hat er zahlreiche Auszeichnungen erhalten, nicht zuletzt den renommierten Astrid Lindgren Gedächtnispreis.
Hello, I'm Sean Tan here in my studio in Melbourne, Australia. Wishing you all the best wherever you happen to be, and glad to have the opportunity to speak about a recent publication of mine, Tales from the Inner City, which has been published by Aladdin in Germany in this very handsome volume here. I thought the best thing to do would be to read a story from this collection of short stories, as they are quite brief and easily digestible, and then just talk a little bit about the ideas behind this book after that. So the story I'm going to read is about a pig. None of the stories in this collection actually have titles. They're just represented by a silhouette of an animal, and each story is about a particular animal living in an inner urban environment, so in the middle of a city, a place where you would not expect them to be. So that is the surrealist premise from which all the stories have sprung. So this story, I'd love to read it to you in German. Alas, it's a language that I do not speak, so I'll have to read it in the original English. In the room at the back of our apartment, there is a pig, sinking. Or maybe sinking isn't the right word. What I mean is that it's disappearing, bit by bit, piece by piece, or rather, slice by slice. And because the vanishing slices are those resting on the concrete floor, it looks just like sinking, only very slowly. So slowly, you can hardly notice. If the pig lifted up what was once its trotters, you would see nothing there. Nothing in the concrete, nothing on the pig, not even a stump. It's kind of hard to explain. Why are they even called trotters anyway? It's not like the pig can trot anywhere. It just stays in the room at the back of our apartment, just like every other pig in every other family, in every other city apartment, sinking. One day it will be completely gone and we'll have to get another pig. Then it will start all over again. Does it hurt? Does it make the pig sad? Dad says no, and he must be right because the pig doesn't cry or make much noise. But maybe pigs suffer in a way that we can't know. Who can say for sure what another animal is feeling? Dad tells us to stop looking at the pig if it bothers us so much. Just keep the door closed and don't forget to turn out the light. But then we can't help thinking about the pig even more, all alone in the dark, getting less and less. Maybe it wants to go out sometimes, meet other pigs, trot around or whatever it is that they can do with what's left, Maybe the pig has a family just like us. What if it has brothers and sisters? Wouldn't it want to visit them? Dad says no, it does not have or would not want anything like that. But he says it in a funny way that leaves us thinking that maybe Dad doesn't know everything, and we see that he sees that we are thinking this, and we know that he knows that we know. And he says, look, I don't like it any more than you do. Then he gives a big sigh the way he does. We turn out the light and join Mum at the dinner table. Later, when everyone is asleep, when every clock stops in the gap between yesterday and tomorrow, and the world turns blue, we sneak out. We take the pig. This is something we are not allowed to do. But we have made a special trolley from oven trays and roller skates anyway. The pig is excited. We can tell from the bit of waggly tail that's left. It's waggling like crazy. The streets are blue, the cars are blue, the empty shops, the empty avenues, bluer than blue. And so are we, and so is the pig, and the moon is huge. We roll him all the way to the park and screw on the trotters we made out of cardboard tubes and paint. Look at him go, flying like a rocket down the path, over the grass and into the moonlit field where all the other pigs are milling about. Listen to them all grunting and squealing, meeting their brothers and sisters and telling each other everything they know and everything they don't. What a ruckus. If you hold your hands up just above your eyes, the buildings and wires and streetlights disappear, so that all you can see are trees and pigs. Then you can imagine it's always been like this, just trees and pigs in the moonlight forever and ever. And every story in the book ends with a double spread illustration. So this is my oil painting of a pig sinking in a concrete room at the back of an apartment in a city where this kind of thing is as normal as having a bathroom. So when writing these stories, I didn't have any particular objective aside from keeping them fairly honest and brief and hopefully strange enough to inspire the imaginations of readers as much as myself. And I generally approach fiction and the interpretation of fiction in the same way that I dream. So I've always loved stories that are about as long as a dream, have just as much reality and focus as a dream, but also that slipperiness, a sense of ambiguity, and the sense that the reality that we live in now is one of many possible realities, and it would be very complacent of us to think that it is somehow absolute or normal. So that's particularly so when we look at the world from the point of view of other animals, and that's the task that I tried to set for myself, to look at ourselves from the point of view of a non-human species. And the more I worked on this book over a period of 5 years, the more I became aware of how anthropocentric we are, how everything that's ever been written or spoken or shared or announced or stated as a fact has come from a human mouth. And it's unfortunate that we haven't had the opportunity to be challenged by the perspective of the other animals who are certainly sentient in some way, most often a way that's unrecognisable to us. It's unfortunate that we haven't had the opportunity to be challenged by them. And so my book kind of circles around that idea without necessarily having any particular straightforward point to make, but I certainly enjoyed writing it, and I hope that if you get a chance you enjoy reading it too. So thank you for this opportunity to speak about it, and I wish you all the best for the rest of the virtual Frankfurt Book Fair. Greetings from Australia. Goodbye.
Der kolumbianische Autor Hector Abad ist 20 Jahre alt, als sein Vater, ein bekannter Arzt und Menschenrechtler, erschossen wird. Weitere 20 Jahre dauert es, bis Hector Abad sich 2006 mit dem semifiktionalen Roman Oblivion auf die Spuren seines Vaters begibt. Nun ist der Roman verfilmt worden unter dem Titel Forgotten Will Be vom spanischen Regisseur Fernando Trueba. Ein Gespräch über die schwierige Suche nach der Wahrheit zwischen Hector Abad, seiner Tochter Daniela Abad und Fernando Trueba.
"33 years ago, something happened that split my life in two. My father, who was a medical doctor, an activist in human rights, and a professor in the university, was murdered in a street in Medellin, Colombia, my city. It was devastating. It was the most devastating fact in my life. My mother, one of my sisters, and me found my father in a big amount of blood in the street. Some days after I put in my notebook, in my diaries, I wrote what happened that day. But I had a child. I had a little daughter, 1 year old. And after some months, I had to go to Italy, to exile. And I decided to forget everything. Not to remember my father every day, for not trying that my children didn't have hatred and a desire of revenge. I tried to educate them as my father educated me, with love, happiness, and not with resentment or revenge. I came back to Colombia and many years passed, and after almost 20 years I saw that my father was being forgotten for everybody, and that was not fair, and that even my children didn't know the grandfather. So I decided to write a book in a very simple way, this book, in the Spanish of my house, in the family Spanish of my house. And the first thing I wanted was my children to know the grandfather, to know why I was afraid of motorcycles, why I was afraid of streets in Medellin. And with the help of my mother, my sisters, students of my father, and many other people, I wrote this non-fiction novel that was read very well in Colombia. And after it was read in Spanish, they also translated the book into different languages and with different titles. For example, into German, it is Brief an einen Schatten, or in French, it is L'oubli que nous savons, or in English, it is slightly different. It is Oblivion, a memoir.
I was born the same year my grandfather was killed, and I didn't get to know him very well. I actually know him through the book of my father. After some years I read the book, a friend of mine, Miguel Salazar, offers me to do and co-direct a documentary based on the book of my father. So after a long research, we did Letter to a Shadow, or Carta a una sombra, about a son who loves his father and about a good man who was killed, my grandfather. Among this, maybe the most important material that we found were the audios where Héctor Abad Gomez talked himself. There were audios, some of them were radio programs, and other were talked letters that he used to send to his family. This made that the documentary was not only narrated by Héctor Abad Faciolince, but also by Héctor Abad Gomez.
Estoy empezando a grabar aquí en la pieza 316 del Hotel Cathay en Singapur. A todos los quiero y a todos los recuerdo.
Thanks to the audience, you get to know him and you get to love him. He will tell us about his life and he will tell us the events that led to his own death.
Then, after the documentary was done, the producer, Gonzalo Cordova, who is a friend of mine, began to tell me, let's do a fiction film with the same material, with your book, with the documentary, and with the facts of your father. And I thought of Fernando Trueba, a Spanish director I had met in a hay festival in Mexico. And I wrote a letter to him suggesting also that the main character could be Javier Cámara, who in some ways remember me, his face, his dealing with people, his sweetness, remembered me, my father.
No le volvás a poner la mano encima a tu hermana.
Es que la preferís a ella, ¿no?
No.
Marta es tu favorita. Como todas las ven, toca violín, guitarra, canta, baila.
No, eso no es verdad.
Making a movie from a good book is always very dangerous. When we adapt a book to the cinema, we always have to think about it. And the most dangerous is a book like El Olvido que Seremos, because it's a very intimate, very truthful book. The memories of a father, a very loved father. A movie can't never do that. No, a movie is an objective work with actors who pretend to be someone else. You are in a completely different territory. I don't mean you have to forget about the book, but you have to take the book as a starting point to go somewhere else and tell the story in your own way, and that's the only way you can honor the book. It's a very curious thing that happened to me with this book, because it was a book that I loved, and the book that I had bought more times in my life and give to more people in my life. So when the author and the producer contact me and propose me to do it, I was shocked, because it was a wonderful proposal. In the other, I didn't thought it was possible to make a movie from El Olvido que Seremos.
I was the script supervisor of Fernando. That for me was an honor, because I admire him. And when I saw Javier Cámara doing my grandfather, it was incredible. It was like he was actually real, like he was actually here with us.
Enseñar, he enseñado bien poco. Si acaso siempre pretendí enseñar a pensar con libertad.
Sometimes I went to the, how do you say that?
Set.
I went to the set, but they tell me, well, you cannot come to the set some days, some very special and difficult days of the filmation. So I only saw some scenes after everything was done in fiction, but fiction was maybe more real than reality. I saw in fiction what I didn't see in reality.
Te importan más los problemas de los demás que los de tu propia familia. Ningún problema es solo de los demás.
Real people, when they are not anymore people, when he is not anymore a person, but a character, and that's what happens with fiction. In a very strange way, the character becomes more real, that sometimes the real experience
and the real person and the real people are more real when they are not anymore people but characters in fiction.